Hey guys, Epidemic 2020 here, and today I want to talk about the epidemic of sexual assault on college campuses. This problem has become so significant, in fact, that many colleges are actually handling this issue themselves rather than handling it in the courtroom. Now, that leads to several different standards, different rules apply to different colleges, since they're pretty much making the laws here. And they both seek to, or many of them seek to, prevent the problem in different ways. What I've seen in common is that you'll have public service announcements, you'll have lots of posters around the campuses, maybe even an ethics advisor to come in and raise awareness. And what seems to happen is these three methods have something in common. They all make blanket statements about morality and treat morality if it's a black and white issue. So here's an example of a claim I keep hearing. Something like, all drunken sex is rape. Right? All drunken sex is rape. And I can see why somebody would say that. If you say that a person can't consent while drunk, and non-consensual sex is rape, then all drunken sex is in fact rape. I can see the desire to say something like that too. If you argue all drunken sex is rape, then hopefully you'll discourage people from having drunken sex, and therefore reduce the number of sexual assault claims at your college. So the idea seems noble. The problem is, I think, is that it's unconvincing. If in fact all drunken sex cases are rape, then we're putting some people in the same category that might not belong there. The frat boy that takes advantage and has sex with a girl who's passed out on his couch is put in the exact same boat as the married couple who decides that they're going to get drunk and then hook up later on in the evening. And it just seems like those two scenarios aren't actually morally equivalent. So there's something iffy about making blanket statements about morality. Something about them just seems strange. Let's try to make a blanket statement about science. And we'll start off with an easy claim. It's supposed to be a simple yes or no question. Right? Does water freeze at 32 degrees Fahrenheit? Yes or no? I'm tempted to say yes, but in reality, neither yes nor no is actually the right answer. The correct answer is sometimes. In fact, most times, water freezes at 32 degrees Fahrenheit. But take a look at this. So this water is somewhere around 20 degrees, and as you can see, it is still unfrozen. Well, it's unfrozen right now. Now it's frozen. You guys see that? Let's try it one more time. Right? Clearly unfrozen water. And now it is frozen. Nifty, huh? Alright, so what we realize is that the more experience we have, the more we realize that blanket statements rarely actually hold true. Watch what happens when I try to force morality into being a black or white issue. Let's take a seemingly simple question. Is killing right or wrong? I feel like most people's temptation is to answer, oh, killing is wrong. But if you think about it, I've oversimplified the problem. Aristotle tells us that we should only ever use blanket statements about morality when we're talking to children. And the reason that he says this is that he wants to persuade them to behave in ways which are usually morally good, but he doesn't think that they're capable of reasoning and fully understanding the world to appreciate the nuance of morality. Now adults, on the other hand, he thinks that we should almost never use blanket statements. Our understanding of morality should be much more nuanced. For example, he thinks a reasonable citizen is going to be able to understand a moral difference between killing someone out of malice and killing someone out of self-defense. So blanket statements like killing is wrong, or lying is wrong, or stealing is wrong, all of those are misleading and oversimplify the problem. We say phrases like that all the time to children, but it's because we don't think they can yet understand or handle the truth. So to say all drunken sex is rape is equally misleading. People probably say it for a noble reason, to discourage people from having drunk sex. But since we aren't children anymore, I just don't think it's going to be persuasive. I don't think people are actually convinced by the claim that all drunken sex is rape. According to a recent survey, I'll link it below, 80% of college students had their last sexual encounter involve alcohol. That's pretty darn significant. If a person doesn't honestly believe they're committing rape, they're not going to feel bad about it. The unconvincing message isn't going to change people's behavior. You need to more accurately label the problem. And if you can describe the problem in a way that makes more sense and gets people to actually understand exactly why this action is wrong, I think then you'll actually have a chance of changing their behavior. I think our society as a whole has this tendency to mislabel things because we want to look like we're tough on crime or tough on immorality. So this is about to get controversial, but follow me with this example for a second. In our society, if an adult has sex with someone who's under 18, or in some states under 16, that counts as a type of rape. Now I want to make perfectly clear, I am totally against adults having sex with children, but I'm hesitant to say that all of those instances are the specific type of moral evil called rape. Rape is a very specific crime. It is non-consensual sex. Now teenagers seem like they're able to consent to having sex with other teenagers all the time. And the implication of saying teenagers can't consent to sex makes us come up with some odd legal scenarios. For example, there's a 19-year-old named Zach Anderson. He goes on some website like Tinder, some kind of hookup app, right? And he ends up meeting a 14-year-old girl who lies about her age, tells him that she's old enough to have sex. They hook up, and then because she's not able to consent, he ends up being accused of rape, and now he's on a sex offender list. Right? There's some other strange implications, though. Why is it that teens seem to be able to consent to having sex with other teens? Why is it the age of consent differs from state to state? Why is it that, or how is it, rather, that on a teen's 18th birthday, they suddenly, almost magically, become capable of consent? Is there really that much difference between when they went to bed the night before and when they woke up the next morning? It seemed kind of strange. Now that being said, I'm open to the option that we just pretend that teenagers can't consent. It seems to be actually a very beneficial thing to pretend is true. If we pretend they can't have sex, or can't consent to sex, then it seems like that would actually help kids out. So instead of attempting to have a very nuanced understanding of when you can consent and when you can't, we can just err on the side of caution. So it may not be the most accurate way of approaching the topic, but it also seems to make sure that less kids get hurt, so it's not a terrible idea. So I'm not really criticizing our legal system too hard for that. But I do think that Mexico has a slightly better way of approaching this topic. Now their age of consent is at age 12. But don't let that fool you. They are not in any way in favor of adults having sex with teenagers. You're still not allowed to have sex with people under the age of 18. So while they recognize that children are technically capable of consent, the teenager doesn't have much life experience and they're very vulnerable. There seems to be a power imbalance between adults and teenagers, almost like the power imbalance between a doctor and a patient. And these are what makes it almost makes it inherently manipulative, the relationship between these two folks. So this is why the relationships aren't allowed. Having sex with teens, at least as understood in Mexico, is still morally wrong. It's not morally wrong because the teens are incapable of consent, but it's morally wrong because of the manipulative aspects of the relationship and the vulnerability of one party. This outlines actually why I personally think drunken sex counts as sexual assault in most scenarios. When you're intoxicated, you're very easy to manipulate. And just because a drunk person might be able to say yes, doesn't mean it's right to take advantage. If a person is drunk, they're particularly vulnerable to exploitation. Perhaps the exploitation of another person's vulnerability is what makes it wrong to have sex with them in that scenario. Even if a teenager or a drunk person is consenting and even begging you to have sex, to oblige could very easily count as taking advantage of their vulnerability. So we might not call it rape, but it still could be a type of sexual assault and therefore something worthy of avoiding. This explains how I can be strongly morally opposed to someone who keeps giving his date drinks in the hope that she's going to end up putting out, and much less morally outraged by the married couple who plans on having a drunken escapade later in the day. The married couple has no appearance of manipulation or exploitation or taking advantage of someone else's vulnerability, where in the other example those things are present. So I think the key to prevent otherwise normal people from engaging in heinous crimes like sexual assault is to actually get them to think very deeply and honestly about these moral issues, and to show them why, given things they already believe in, drunken sex is a very often morally wrong action. I think a person is much more likely to realize that they might be exploiting someone vulnerable and to realize why that's wrong, then we're going to be likely to convince them that they're raping someone who is possibly actually asking them for sex. In short, I think people are much more likely to follow reasons that they understand and have internalized than they are to follow rules that they don't actually believe in. Anyway, these are just my ideas, and I'd love to hear what y'all have to say on the topic. As always, test everything, hold on to the good. And it is not frozen.